The Empire still stands. Galbatorix still rules. And after 100 years, the Dragon Riders remain nothing more than a memory. Yet the story of the Dragon Riders is not over. In many ways, it is only just beginning. This is Brisingr, the chapter of the story where the past finally begins to catch up with the present. It starts the way it should, with a mission half-mad, one no reasonable person would approve. Eragon and his cousin Roran lie flat in the grass near Helgrind. For peaked rock rising from the plain like a tooth of some god who decided to freeze mid-chew. Together with the dragon Saphira, they had flown here over 2 nights from the burning plains, high above the clouds, so no one below would have the chance for unnecessary questions. The mission has 2 goals, tightly linked. Rescue Katrina, Roran's fiancée, held by the Razak, half-insect servants of King Galbatorix whose very breath can bring a grown man to his knees, and take revenge. The Razak tortured and murdered Garo, Eragon's foster father and Roran's father. Both have a debt that has been waiting too long to be paid. This mission, as Eragon had to explain to Niswada and Arya for several hours, is not pure madness. The timing is good. Galbatorix doesn't expect to strike into the heart of the Empire while the Varden are tying down his forces at the border of Cirta. Murtagh and his Dragonthorn have flown toward Ubane. Probably so the king can personally scold them for the last battle, and shouldn't be back soon. And as long as Katrina is in enemy hands, Roran is open to blackmail, and through Roran, so is Eragon. Saphira ended the debate with a single roar that shook the tent canvas, declaring she was flying anyway. Niswada gave her consent with the face of someone who knows they've lost but isn't going to admit it. Before the 3 can approach Helgrind, they must wait. A cult of rock worshippers is holding its regular ritual. A priest without limbs, carried on a litter, chants with the whole congregation, preaches about blood and madness ripening in human hearts. One of the acolytes, to the crowd's delight, proves the depth of his faith with an extra cut to his own wrist. Eragon watches from a distance and notes that he has traveled with dwarves and elves, but none of their acts were even half as strange. Roran mutters under his breath and nods toward Helgrind. When the procession leaves, it leaves behind 2 slaves chained to an altar. Eragon closes his eyes and sends his mind toward Helgrind, moving from mind to mind. Insects, lizards, birds, small mammals. He finally reaches a faint human spark somewhere high in the rock. Katrina is there. There is someone else, too, whom Eragon prefers not to mention yet. He senses no Razak, no Letherblaka. Maybe they are deep inside. Maybe far away. Unknown. And all that is known is that at night the Razak grow stronger, and attacking before dawn would be foolish. Roran suggests a simple test. If by morning the prisoners at the altar are gone, they will know the enemies came back for a meal. Eragon wants to free them at once, but understands it would ruin everything. They pull back to camp. By the fire, the conversation turns to paths both would rather avoid. Roran speaks slowly, as if every word weighs something. He talks about 2 guards at the gate in Narda. One had milky white hair and looked to be in his mid-20s, whom he killed because he had no choice because they recognized him. He stabbed one under the chin, crushed the other's skull. He can still feel those bones under his palm. When he sleeps, the fire from the Tirm docks, which they set ablaze during the escape, burns in his head. He asks Eragon if he sees it too, the dead in dreams. Eragon says yes. He knows it. Saphira tries to explain that the burning heat of battle is no shame, that she has fought with teeth and claws since hatching and regrets no death that stood in her way. Eragon and Roran are silent, not because they don't understand, rather because they understand too well, and that is exactly what frightens them. Eragon also tells Roran something that seems obvious to him by now, but hits his cousin like a blow. He is immortal. The elven transformation at Alagaësia changed him forever. He will live for thousands of years while everyone around him grows old and fades. Arya is over 100 years old and looks like a young woman. Eragon will look the same in a few centuries. Roran sits with that in silence, then says it doesn't sound like a cheerful way to live. Eragon agrees that it isn't. They also talk about magic. Eragon explains why he's worried about the attack tomorrow. Defensive spells work differently than attacks. To block 100 ways of killing someone, a single well-built counterspell is often enough. If Galbatorix has been careful enough over the past 100 years to surround the Razak with such shields, none of the death words Eragon learned at Alagaësia may work. That leaves only physical combat. Roran stares into the fire. Eragon says he'll manage, don't worry. Both know that's the kind of lie you tell someone close before a fight. By morning, the slaves at the altar are gone. Saphira launches at dawn. She flies up to Helgrind and finds that the rock face is an illusion. She flies straight through stone that turns out to be a magical veil hiding the cave entrance. Inside, the space is vast, reeking, lined with Letherbloca scratches. 5 narrow tunnels and 1 wide one. Before they can investigate, attackers pour from the tunnels. The fight is chaotic and brutal in ways no plan prepared for. Eragon's spells fail one after another. The Razak are protected exactly as he feared. Not one of the killing techniques Oromis taught him breaks through Galbatorix's magical shield. Eragon recites them all in turn, 12 of them, while Saphira battles the Letherbloca with wings and claws and Roran hammers anything that moves. Eragon takes a wound to the knee from a Razak, nothing serious, but the pain is sharp. Saphira takes several hits to her left side. More serious. Roran is thrown into a wall by a Letherbloca tail and loses his bearings for a moment. In that moment, Eragon is alone. Then Roran gets up. He kills his Razak with his own hammer, in a series of blows that are more like an execution than a fight. For his father. For his home. For Carvajal. The final blow shatters the creature's shell like a dried gourd. A pool of purple blood spreads around the hammer. Roran stands over the body and says nothing for a moment. The second Razak flees into the tunnels. Eragon seals Katrina's cell with a spell, so the enemy can't use her as a hostage, and goes after them. Along the way he finds something he didn't expect. Rags instead of clothes. Bones under skin. As gouged out. Sloan. Katrina's father. The traitor who gave her and the whole village to the Razak in exchange for a promise that his daughter would come to no harm. A promise that was never kept. Eragon stops over the sleeping prisoner and doesn't know what to do. Any lawmaker would sentence Sloan to death. But Eragon looks at the butcher and sees a man who loved only one thing his whole life and did something terrible trying to protect it. That is not an argument for saving him. It is an argument for not deciding in haste. He puts Sloan to sleep with a spell and moves on. Katrina is in the 9th cell from the entrance. Pale, thin, terrified, but alive. When the door opens and she sees Roran, her face is for a moment so open and full that Eragon instinctively looks away to give them space. Roran pulls her into his arms. Katrina asks about her father. Roran says they came too late. A single tear runs down Katrina's cheek. She closes her eyes. Eragon clears her of enemy enchantments, checks that no one hid a lethal trap inside her, and together they walk out of the tunnels. The Razak is waiting. The last exchange is short and cold. The Razak says Galbatorix is close to discovering the true name, of what it can't say. Tries to bargain for its life, offering information. Eragon refuses. The Razak throws a curse. May you leave Alagaësia and never return. Eragon knows those words. The herbalist Angela spoke them when she cast dragon bones for him in Tyrm. A chill touches the back of his neck for a moment. But the enemy in front of him is real and present, and curses are left for later. For our father, for our home, for Carvajal, for Brom. The revenge is done. He finds with surprise that he feels sad. For so many months this mission gave the days their meaning. Now the goal is gone and only what comes after remains. Exhaustion, a wounded knee, and a cave full of bodies. He promises himself he will never again let himself be so tightly bound to a single task. Now comes the problem of Sloan. Saphira flies off with Katrina and Roran toward the Varden camp. Together they would be too easy to spot. Eragon stays alone with the prisoner and a question that has no easy answer. Bring Sloan to the Varden? Roran and Katrina would never forgive Eragon for making her watch her father stand trial, and they would be right. Kill him himself? That feels like something he shouldn't do, not without a verdict, not without the authority that makes death something other than murder. Somewhere in that reasoning is a line Eragon doesn't want to cross. If he starts killing by his own judgment alone, how is he different from Galbatorix? He looks for a third way. For a long, slow hour he listens to Sloan. Not through telepathy, but carefully, gathering fragments from the man's whole life. Scars, the way he reacts to pain, years of the butcher's trade, love for Katrina and her mother, fear of mountains, pride in his craft, the story of the betrayal. Eragon fits it all together like shards of pottery dug from the earth, and suddenly he has Sloan's true name in the ancient language before him. The word that is the butcher more precisely than any name given at birth. A true name is not a title. It is a full understanding of what someone is, so complete it allows absolute control. Eragon realizes that to know Sloan's true name, he had to understand him better than he understands himself, because he still doesn't know his own. That thought is uncomfortable in several ways at once. Eragon speaks Sloan's name and binds him with oaths in the ancient language. He will never meet Katrina, never speak to her, never make contact. Sloan fights it, screams, sobs, grinds his teeth. But a true name leaves no room for refusal. Eragon takes his time, shaping each spell carefully, so he doesn't get a single word wrong. When he's done, he hands Sloan a hawthorn staff, the same one he carried through the whole journey, and tells him there is a third option. If Sloane goes north and manages to earn back even part of what he lost, the elves at Alesmara may restore his sight. That is not a promise. It is hope from someone who doesn't know if the elves would actually do it. Sloane calls after him, "Monster," tells him to kill him instead. Eragon says no. He walks, leaves Sloane with a staff and darkness behind his eyes and a possibility that is both punishment and mercy. For the rest of that day and into the next, Eragon walks alone through the dry stretches of the Empire, without food. His elven senses make every step more vivid than he'd like. Cracks in the grass, the smell of dust, distant patrol voices. He passes a soldier camp, hides in bushes from a patrol, lies still for a moment with a spear tip passing an inch from his face. Eragon lies there a moment longer, pressing his nails into the ground. Near an abandoned elven tower, Ithindra, he comes across an old eccentric named Tenga. The old man lives alone, surrounded by carvings made by someone who left long ago, and is searching for the answer to a question he hasn't fully formed yet. The conversation is like a walk in a forest with no path. Interesting, but not going anywhere in particular. Eragon eats a meal, sleeps a few hours, and leaves him with a question. In the town of Eastcroft, he runs into Arya by chance. The elf is in human disguise, hood up, angled eyes hidden, long ears covered, and is sitting against a wall at an inn surrounded by 4 men with bad intentions and poor judgment. Eragon steps in, plays the brother, says the lady is with him. A moment of tension, a few words, 3 of them leave. 1 doesn't. Eragon asks quietly. The man doesn't back down. Eragon uses a non-verbal argument. They sit at a table and Arya looks at him the way elves do, as if they see too much at once. Eragon tells her about Sloane. Everything, the curse, the true name, the staff, the hope. Arya listens without interrupting, which from her is a kind of respect. Then she says her mother, Queen Islanzadi, would have had Sloane killed. Eragon says he knows, but this is who he is, and he's not going to apologize for it. She says everything with him has to be complicated. He says that's possible. They spend the night in a rented room, Eragon on the floor by the door, Arya on the bed, both listening. Eragon doesn't sleep long, because his thoughts keep returning to Arya in ways he can't control or fix. He has loved her for a long time. She turned him down clearly and calmly. She is 100 years older. Their worlds are different. The long view of near immortal life changes everything. Eragon knows this. It doesn't change what he feels. Before dawn they slip out of town over a wall with the help of a wooden pole and Arya's elven strength. A guard passes underneath, swings his lantern, mutters something, and walks off. They jump to the other side and run through the dark between houses. On the way back to camp, Eragon notices that Arya can sense his presence from a distance. Not through telepathy, through the fact that the bond between rider and dragon is so strong that anyone sensitive to the living world can feel it. Birds sing of his coming, trees remember his touch. Eragon says she'll have to teach him that someday. Arya says it's not a trick, only attention. They reach camp. On the other side of the camp, while Eragon was gone, a separate story played out, just as important and differently painful. Naswada is the leader of the Varden, daughter of the murdered Ajihad, a woman who carries the full weight of a coalition made up of humans, dwarves, Urgles, and the private ambitions of King Orin. Nominally an ally, but never one to miss a chance to remind everyone he matters to. She runs it all from a red pavilion, with Jormungandr as her first commander, surrounded by the Nighthawks, warriors sworn in the ancient language to her life and safety. Fadawar, leader of the influential dark-skinned tribes, arrives with a scepter in hand and demands positions, privileges, special treatment. His argument is built on blood and tribal loyalty. Family above everything, a leader must choose who is hers. Naswada listens, understands the meaning beneath the words, and refuses. She cannot favor anyone. She must be a leader for all of them, or the coalition falls apart like an old cart on a bad road. The conversation reaches a point of no return. Fadawar challenges her to the trial of the long knives, an old custom of his people where both cut their own forearms in turns until one passes out. The winner takes command of the loser's people. Naswada knows it's a trap. Fadawar is large, strong, and has done this before. She never has. She also knows that refusing means admitting his claim to power. She agrees. The room fills. It becomes public. Orin protests. Naswada says the decision is hers and the discussion is over. Farika, trembling, helps her remove her dress to bare her arms. The cuts come in turns. The first is bad. The second worse. By the fourth, Naswada understands this is not a test of pain tolerance. It is a test of how long you can stay conscious while bleeding. The pools on the floor grow with each round. Fadawar bleeds harder. His cuts are deeper because he is bigger, but he is also stronger and can last longer. By the 8th cut, Naswada is at the edge. The pain has stopped being a specific thing. It has become a general state, background noise to everything. Thoughts come that have nothing to do with fighting. For this to end, for someone to say she can stop, that it's no shame to let go. But she knows she will stop only when she faints or when Fadawar faints first. Fadawar raises his knife for the 8th time. He stands there with the blade over his own arm. Sweat runs down his face. 1 second. 2. The knife does not come down. Fadawar lowers his weapon. Niswada wins. She sits in the chair and tries not to faint now, when it's over, in front of his people. Farika wraps her arms in bandages. Niswada refuses magical healing. The scars are meant to stay, because scars are proof. Angela the herbalist tends to her with plants, cursing quietly at men, tradition, and the whole human race. Elva, the girl marked by Eragon's spell, who feels the pain of every living being nearby, sat quietly through the whole trial, absorbing the suffering of both without a word. She tells Niswada she is strong. Niswada thanks her. Elva says gratitude means nothing to her, and asks if there's anything to eat. Not every hero in this story is dramatic. When Saphira lands in camp with Roran and Katrina but without Eragon, Niswada goes still for a few seconds. Saphira communicates through thought. Eragon chose to stay in the Empire. Why, the dragon doesn't say at once, because it's not her story to tell. Niswada grasps that the center is shifting. Arya vanishes from camp without a word, running north to find Eragon. No one stops her, because no one is fast enough. Roran asks for an audience. He reports formally, offers his service, and also asks for a wedding, as soon as possible because Katrina is expecting. Niswada understands the urgency and doesn't ask for details. She gives him a mission under Martland Redbeard and Katrina a gift from her own dwarf supplies. Roran bows, thanks her, and leaves. Outside the tent, Birgit is waiting for him. A woman from Carvajal whose husband died during the escape, one of many whose deaths can be traced back to Roran's decisions. She stands there calmly, gripping a dagger through her dress, and tells him she hasn't forgotten and that she will collect her payment. Not now. Someday. She walks away. Roran lets out a breath and notes that he barely kept his guts on the inside. Eragon and Arya return to camp. Niswada is injured, pale, with the marks of the trial on her arms. Eragon explains the situation with Sloane. Arya has promised to stay quiet. Niswada listens, understands, and doesn't judge, though she's not sure she would have done the same. Saphira goes out to check the perimeter. For a moment at a shallow pool that Eragon had used earlier to speak with Queen Islanzadi. Eragon whispers to his reflection in the water. I'm sorry. Saphira sees it. She rumbles that she understands. 5 elven figures land in the clearing. Then 7. Then all 12. Blodgarm, son of Idriel the Fair, dressed in dark navy fur with a mane between his shoulder blades and tufts on his ears, introduces himself and the others. Their mission: personal guard for Eragon, sent by Queen Islanzadi. They also bring news: Sunan has fallen in the night. The elves are pushing through the streets. The campaign is taking shape. Eragon looks at all of it and breathes. The Razak are dead. Katrina is free. Sloane is somewhere going north with a staff and darkness behind his eyes. Roran has a mission and a fiancé. Niswada has scars and a one duel. The elves are here. And over all that relief floats the name the Razak didn't want to speak. The true name Galbatorix is close to finding. Whatever that means. Blodgarm and his elves have barely finished reporting the fall of Sunan when their presence becomes the first complication of the new day. Niswada asks one of the Nighthawks, Garvin, to telepathically verify the identity of the new arrivals, because Galbatorix's spies have slipped into the Varden ranks before, and elves in human form is a thought that's only absurd on the surface. Garvin enters the elves' minds and comes back standing with wide pupils, a pale face, and no ability to speak. Contact with elven consciousness proved too intense for a human. Niswada surveys the damage and regrets not asking Angela, who would apparently have handled something others can't even touch. Elva, standing quietly to one side, tugs her sleeve and whispers one word: salt. Niswada focuses on the taste of something salty to break the growing spell of Blodgarm's scent. Musk, juniper berries, smoke, which seems to have taken hold of every woman in camp. Elva is a useful antidote. Eragon and Arya haven't reached the Varden yet. They're running across dry plains to the southwest, and their only plan if they meet a patrol is the story of 2 villagers heading to relatives. When a road cuts across their path and 15 riders surround them, an officer with a mustache swaying like balanced scales decides without ceremony that both will be conscripted into the king's army. Eragon listens to the insults, lets himself be hit on the back of the head, and waits. Arya waits too, but less long. The fight lasts a few seconds. Arya vaults stirrups like someone who has practiced it thousands of times because she probably has. Eragon clubs one man's neck with a pebble, takes his sword, uses no magic. Magic is detectable and would cause noise. When the dust settles, all the soldiers are dead except one. A young man fleeing through the grass, crying, begging, changing direction like a startled rabbit, saying he's too young and has a family and will tell everyone they were here and he's very sorry. Eragon chases him, catches him, breaks his neck. And that is the moment that will stay with him for a long time. It has to be said plainly to be understood. Eragon is not a villain. He killed that man because he had to, because otherwise the whole camp would have started searching for two fugitives on the plain and it would have ended badly. He knew that through the entire chase. And he heard the man crying. By the bodies, Arya asks directly, how could you kill that man without hesitation? And with Sloane you couldn't? Eragon says the soldier was a threat. Sloane was not. Arya is quiet for a long moment, then admits she should understand that difference. That she doesn't, not right away. That she's ashamed to hear moral lessons from someone so young. It's not an insult. It's something she genuinely feels, coming from the belief that after 100 years of life she should have reached things Eragon takes for granted. Arya drives a knife under the jaw of one of the dead with a spear. Eragon shouts, "What are you doing?" She explains calmly. Elves destroy the bodies of fallen enemies so Galbatorix can't summon their spirits and question the dead. Spirits retain memory from the moment of death and can pass on everything they witnessed. Eragon flinches first, understands she's right second. Then sits on a stone and quietly tries not to think about the man who cried. That same night, at a campfire somewhere on the plain, something Eragon didn't expect arrives. Swarms of glowing spheres spinning with increasing speed around their camp, emitting a metallic hum that makes the hair stand on end and teeth click together. Spirits, incorporeal beings that feed on the energy of the world, capable of driving a person mad through uncontrolled contact alone. Arya calmly explains not to cast any magic. Spirits react aggressively to any attempt at control, and touches one of them with an open palm. Eragon watches something vast and very old flow through Arya. When the spirits withdraw, he sees wet tracks on her face, though he hadn't seen her cry. Then she points to one of the spheres. Eragon reaches out his hand. Contact with a spirit is not an experience that can be put into words. Afterward he says only that he felt something looking through him like through a window, and that he's not sure whether it took anything. What's left is the feeling of ecstasy mixed with fear, as if he touched the living axis of the world and wasn't certain whether the axis knew it. Arya doesn't explain exactly what spirits want from contact with the living, because no one fully knows. Triana of Dwarf King had summoned spirits perhaps once in 6 years, and each time it required long preparation. What happened at the campfire on the plain was willing initiation on the spirit side. Why here, why them, no one asks because the question has no address. The spirits leave as suddenly as they arrived. Afterward Eragon and Arya talk for a long time. About elves, about the war, about the Forsworn and what Galbatorix did to their dragons, turning 13 thinking beings into something barely more than tools. They talk about true names as such, and about what the Arazak refused to reveal before dying. Eragon repeats the words to Arya. Galbatorix is close to finding the true name. Arya listens and is quiet for a moment, then says it may not be the name of a specific person. It may be the true name of the ancient language itself, the rules from which all of Alagaësia's magic is built. If Galbatorix finds it, he'll be able to change the rules, cast spells outside the rules, control the very foundation of magic. No mage, no rider could stand against him. That is the coldest moment of the whole night. They also talk about Arya, about what she went through in Gilead where Durza held and tortured her for months. Arya rarely speaks of it. Eragon asks directly, and she says a little more than usual, that she lost Phelan there, an elf who had been with her for years and who loved her, and that watching someone's death hurts differently than your own wounds. That before Gilead she danced and sang and was not afraid of the approaching darkness. Now it's different. She doesn't say how it is now. She doesn't need to. Eragon puts his hand on hers. She doesn't take hers away. They reach camp. Among the faces reaching toward him, Roran, who grabs him in a hug and says that was very stupid and next time he should warn him before going off alone, because these stunts are becoming a habit. Katrina thanks him calmly and directly. Naswada waits in the pavilion. In the red pavilion, Naswada and Oren hear the account of the mission. Both, to Eragon's surprise, approve the decision about Sloane, not because they like the punishment but because if he had dealt death himself, he would have claimed an authority that belongs to no single person. The law is above. Oren says plainly that Eragon showed more maturity than he expected. Eragon isn't sure whether those words were meant to be flattering. Naswada organizes a dinner that evening for friends, Roran, Katrina, Angela, Giad with his wife Helen, Horst and family. For a few hours Eragon is simply a boy from Carvajal sitting at a table with people he has known since childhood. Angela puts a little dancing man made from a bread crust on the table. Someone laughs too loudly after too much wine. Eragon eats a proper meal without stopping to save anyone. In the morning, there is the matter of Elva. Eragon once promised to lift the curse he cast on her. The curse that makes the girl feel the pain of every being nearby and cannot free herself from it. Not sleeping, not waking. He tries now in Niswada's pavilion with Angela and Saphira present. Elva sits without moving. Eragon recites spells for long minutes, focused so intensely that sweat appears on his brow. He builds the counter spell layer by layer carefully because a mistake could fuse two spells instead of undoing the first, and it would be worse than before. When he finishes, Elva opens her eyes and says no. She doesn't want the curse lifted. She has come to understand it is her power, not her suffering, and from now on she will use it by her own choice, not because anyone asks or forces her. She will do as she wishes. She knows every weakness of everyone present and is prepared to use that knowledge if anyone stands in her way. She stands and walks out of the pavilion, past guards who don't react in time. Eragon watches her go and asks quietly, "What kind of monster have I made?" Niswada is calm, or at least appears calm, which with her often amounts to the same thing. Angela mutters that, in a way, this might be for the better. Salembum flicks his tail and jumps off the table. Eragon sits for a moment in silence, looking at the spot where Elva stood. Elva is perhaps 6 years old. She moves like someone who is 600, and she knows every weakness of every person within dozens of feet, constantly, with no way to turn it off. Eragon once told her he would protect her and that she would protect Alagaësia. He spoke the spell wrong, because he was too young and too sure of himself, and turned her childhood into permanent contact with the pain of other people's existence. Now she has decided to live with that on her own terms. Eragon thinks that may be the only thing he could have given her in this situation. Over the following days, Eragon takes care of things put off since his return. At Frederick the Varden's armorer, he leaves with a new sword, a single-edged falchion with a wide, asymmetrically tempered blade. Frederick chose it not because it's the finest, but because every blow blocked with this sword hits the flat instead of the edge, saving the edge for attack. Eragon had earlier covered his knuckles with metal plates. A rough, not very elegant solution protecting skin in a fight, which Angela inspects with real appreciation and pats his hand, saying they're as ugly as toad warts, but that doesn't bother her. He also visits Glaedr. He tells him how Brum died. He promised this since the battle on the burning plains and keeps his word. Glaedr listens, and when Eragon finishes, is quiet for a moment, looking at the grounds at the bottom of his cup. For so many years he had hoped they would set off somewhere together again. His wife Helen places her hand on his shoulder. Glaedr returns the touch and gives her a weak smile. He tells Eragon he was glad when he discovered Brom was still alive, and then lost him again within weeks and felt the world was mocking him in a cruel way. Eragon has no answer to that. He sits with him for a moment before leaving. Glaedr gives him Domia Abr Werda, the full history of Alagaësia by Heslint the monk, which Eragon first saw in Glaedr's library in Tirm. Eragon carries it to his tent like a relic, his first book of his own. The morning of the wedding day, 3 horn signals interrupt the preparations. Forces of Galbatorix are approaching from ships on the Giant River, 300 soldiers. Arya looks for a moment and recognizes the pattern. It's bait. Murtagh and Thorn are somewhere in the sky, waiting for Eragon to ride out to meet the soldiers and attack when the rider is focused elsewhere. They assume he is alone. Arya proposes pulling back from the soldiers. Let the elves lend Eragon their strength. 13 mages is something Murtagh didn't anticipate. Niswada sends swordsmen, lancers, and archers at the soldiers. Saphira launches. The aerial battle between Saphira and Thorn is the most serious clash since the Burning Plains. Thorn is too large for his age. Galbatorix accelerated his growth with magic, but less experienced, less confident in his maneuvers. Saphira flies as if she was born in the air. Thorn as if he's learning on the run. Even so, he is aggressive and unpredictable, and Murtagh on his back makes no mistakes. Eragon and Murtagh fight simultaneously, sword at close range and telepathy at distance. The elves lend Eragon energy through linked spells. Murtagh is shaken. Eragon tells him there is a way out. A true name changes with the person. If Murtagh truly changes, not pretends but becomes someone different from the inside, his name changes, and a changed name means void oaths. Galbatorix loses his hold. Eragon also tells him to look at someone he admires who chose a different path, and to start acting the same way. That it may take some time. That it's worth trying. On Murtagh's face something appears that Eragon hasn't seen before. A desperate longing, as if he heard something he wants to believe and cannot, because believing it for too long is too dangerous. Then he says that he and Thorn cannot change in a single moment. That, in the meantime, Galbatorix will be giving orders. That they were already defeated once by Eragon and Saphira and don't intend to allow a repeat. Saphira takes a cut to her wing membrane. A 3-foot wound that doesn't sever muscle but bleeds heavily. Eragon takes a falchion blow to the side. The point pierces the edge of his mail and enters the body. The pain is sharp and precise. Arya heals him with a spell from a distance, so Murtagh thinks Eragon is still wounded and won't expect an attack. In the end, Saphira seizes Thorn by the wing and bites down. Thorn wrenches violently. Eragon casts Leda, the same spell Murtagh once used to pin him, and for a few seconds the red dragon and his rider hang beneath Saphira like a weight. Murtagh breaks free. Both fly north. Saphira lands, more falls than lands. Eragon loses consciousness for a moment, and when he comes back, the elves and Orin's riders are standing over him. The battle at camp is over. The cost is devastating. 3/4 of Naswada's swordsmen, most of the lancers, some of the archers, almost all of Orin's cavalry. Perhaps 500, perhaps 600 dead in total. Galbatorix's soldiers fought under a spell-blocking pain. They rose after blows that should have killed them, laughed with wounds that gave them minutes of life instead of seconds. The Varden killed them one by one, but with 3 times the losses they should have taken, because no one knew when it was truly safe to turn their back on a man on the ground. Naswada stands over the reports with bandaged arms. When Jormungandr finishes reading the numbers, the tent is silent. Then Naswada says to Eragon, "Have du Vrangr Gata recreate Galbatorix's spell. We must copy him in this whether we like it or not." For hours after the first horn signal, when the dead have been counted and secured, the ceremony takes place. Eragon stands on a hill covered in yellow flowers above the giant river. It is bright, the air smells fresh, the wind is moderate, nothing like 4 hours ago, when dust and blood covered half the sky. Below the hill stand the villagers from Carvajal, everyone Eragon has known since childhood. They have started singing the old wedding songs from the Palancar Valley, about the changing of seasons and the young replacing the old. Eragon listens and for a moment forgets entirely where he is. Roran and Katrina climb the hill under an escort that Naswada talked into discretion with great effort. The Night Hawks stand to the side instead of marching in front. Roran didn't argue that point, because he knew the ceremony was for the people of Carvajal, not for the army. Eragon performs the wedding. He's not trained. He learned the formula from the healer Gertrude the previous evening and recites it with the focused expression of someone who knows that if he makes a mistake, his cousin will not forgive him. On Roran's face is an expression that could be described as stunned happiness. On Katrina's face, the same. When the couple kisses, the crowd erupts. Somewhere in the back, someone cries. Eragon notes they both look stunned with happiness. Roran asks sharply what's so funny. Eragon says, exactly that. After the feast, that evening, Eragon gives Roran and Katrina 2 rings of pure gold, extracted by magic from quarry stone. Enchanted so they can locate each other in any circumstances, and so that anyone in the family can call for help with the words. The next morning Naswada calls Eragon to a meeting and presents a plan in 2 parts. First, the dwarves still haven't chosen a new king after Hrothgar's death. Without dwarf strength and fortifications, the Varden's army is too weak. Someone must go to Trondheim and speed up the election. Someone the dwarves trust and who isn't a candidate for the throne. Eragon was Hrothgar's friend. He is an adopted member of Clan Durgrimst in Gedum. Second, Eragon must return to Oromis for training. In every fight since, Murtagh proves a little stronger, a little faster, a little better protected. Without further instruction, Eragon will fall further and further behind, and the day will come when elven support won't be enough. Alesmara is thousands of miles north. Saphira can fly at night, invisible from the ground. Eragon will pretend to be in camp. Blodgarm and his companions will stay and maintain appearances. The real Eragon will fly north at night to Trondheim, then to Alesmara, and return before dawn. Eragon agrees. The question of when to set out has a simple answer: as soon as possible. The mission to Trondheim requires speed. The longer the dwarves have no king, the harder it is to mobilize them, and every week without dwarf support is a week in which the Varden fight against Galbatorix's advantage. Eragon also thinks of Oromis and Glaedr, the old elf and his dragon, hidden for decades in Dhu Weldon Varden, carrying wounds that never fully healed, waiting for the moment when they could help differently than through careful waiting. Eragon always knew he would return to Alesmara. He didn't know it would be at night, in secret, as part of a political bluff. Before he leaves, he and Naswada visit the wounded. Many can no longer be healed, wounds too deep, too little time for the mages, too many sick at once. But Naswada says they should know that someone knows they're there. Eragon walks between the field beds, squeezes hands, says the things said at a bedside. One of the older soldiers grabs his wrist and whispers that he saw his brother and that he was burning, but not like Eragon. As if his soul had a different source. As if he were an abyss in the shape of a man with something else showing through. Eragon leaves that encounter with a thought he sets aside. He doesn't know yet that he'll have to come back to it. The night after the wedding, Roran and Katrina lie in their tent. Katrina asks how he plans to take care of them, her and the child. Roran says the Varden will fight regardless, because otherwise Galbatorix will find them and the generations after them. Katrina cries. Roran holds her tighter. He says he would rather lose an arm than leave her, but would sooner die than let anyone harm her or the child. He asks her to leave when the pregnancy makes travel harder. She says no. She wants one more night of quiet. Before dawn, a small boat woven from dry grass blades drifts to their tent. It hovers at the entrance, rocks on invisible currents, and slowly floats away. Roran watches it calmly, because in a world where dragons are real and elves build towers by singing, this one strangeness fits somewhere in the middle of normal. Eragon sleeps on the other side of camp. In the morning, the road to the dwarves waits. Eragon leaves the Varden camp at night, alone on Saphira's back, except not alone and not on Saphira's back, because Saphira stays behind and pretends to be Eragon, which sounds absurd and is also the only plan that works. Blodgarm creates a magical double of Eragon that walks out of the tent, waves to the guards, and disappears back inside. Saphira is recognizable enough that her presence is proof enough that both are in camp. The plan has Eragon arriving on foot alongside Nar Garshvog, the Urgal chieftain who offers himself as a traveling companion, because his legs can keep pace with elven ones, while Saphira joins after the coronation. They run through the wild eastern plains of the Empire. A day, a night, another day. He knocks down a deer with a single thrown knife for dinner and dresses it in minutes. Eragon eats the meat and doesn't apologize to himself for it, because learning not to took more time than he'd like to admit. Garshvog and Eragon sit by the fire and talk about things there's never time to ask about on ordinary days. Along the way they pass a forest inhabited by Shurk, giant wolves so large their paws are like shields. Eragon speaks to one of them in the ancient language, in the voice of a rider addressing a creature as an equal. The wolf listens, flicks its ears, and walks away. Garshvog asks what that was. Eragon explains. Garshvog nods with more gravity than Eragon would have expected. Garshvog tells him an old Urgal legend, about Magar, a girl ugly and unnoticed by everyone around her, who climbed to the peak of the highest mountain in the spine and asked the goddess Rana for help. The story is older than any city in Alagaësia, and speaks of beauty as a kind of strength, or of Rana as a god wise enough to tell the difference between a request and a plea. Eragon listens and doesn't ask for the moral, because in Garshvog's mouth this story needs none. Eragon asks about Yezuak, the village he found with Braum at the very start of his journey. Bodies stacked in a pile. Garshvog doesn't deny it. He says before his horns had grown, his people killed that way because those were the rules of gaining status. Raid, defeat, kill, earn enough honor for a female to choose you. No one taught them this was wrong, because inside their understanding of the world it was as normal as rain. Now those rules are changing, perhaps forever, perhaps only for the duration of this war. Garshvog says he knows one thing. If Urgals don't find another path to honor, in 20 years their children will start killing again. He asks Eragon whether he believes a person can become someone other than what their history made them. Eragon doesn't answer directly. He thinks of Murtagh. He thinks of Sloane. He says, I don't know, but I think it's worth trying. At the edge of dwarf territory Garshvog stops. He says Eragon must go on alone. His presence would needlessly complicate the negotiations. Eragon watches the Urgal turn and walk back through the forest, large and calm as a hill. Then he descends the slope into the valley, and dwarf children spot him and shout, Argitlam, and grab his hands and pull him toward the village. Eragon lets himself be led with a foolish smile on his face, because the noise of children is the most pleasant sound he's heard in a week. Oric waits for him at Bregan Hold, the seat of clan in Jedum, with his wife Vedra. Vedra is the Grimscarvelers of the clan, manager of estates, herds, supplies, and craft production, a position with no good equivalent in any human language. Oric shows him stone trees in the mist, petrified forests from thousands of years ago, their sky visible through dense columns of granite. He says it may be the work of gods, may be an ancient disaster. No one knows. Eragon sits among them for a long while. Oric explains the political situation. 13 clans, 6 votes needed for a majority. 3 serious candidates, Oric, the clever and sharp iron of Clan Vrenshurden, warrior women whose name means something between she-wolves and destroyer of enemies, and Nato of Clan Nurlcarith, a conservative who believes allying with the Varden is the mistake of men too frightened to see that Galbatorix won't attack them anyway, because a free people in the mountains is worth less to him than a people inside his borders. Az Swelden Rak Anhuin, the clan that declared itself Eragon's blood enemy back in Tarnag, is the wild element. They openly despise him and oppose even his presence at the chief's councils. Oric wants the throne. He asks Eragon to support only him and promise nothing to other clans that might complicate negotiations. Eragon hesitates. He can see how sharp Iron is, and knows she would probably be a good queen, only unpredictable on the question of the Varden alliance. In the end he agrees, he supports Oric. Oric grips him hard and says he won't forget this. Then the coronation stalls and everything stops, because that is exactly how dwarf politics looks when you want something specific. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Roran rides with Martland Redbeard's unit on raids deep into Imperial territory. Martland has a silver beard, a sword, and several decades of battle experience, and approaches Roran with cold pragmatism. You have talent? I don't trust you yet, you'll have to earn it. Roran listens and remembers. The first raids are rough. Galbatorix's soldiers fight under a pain-blocking spell. They rise after blows that should stop them, laugh with wounds, crawl with arrows in them, hamstring men from the ground. Karn, the unit's mage, is the only one who truly understands how it works and how to deal with it. Aim for heads. Only the brain doesn't repair itself. Roran's knights in Martland's camp have their rhythm. Camp without fire, cold food, conversations in muffled voices. Roran and Karn talk in the evenings about different things. Karn is thin, pale, and too delicate for his trade, and Roran sees in him someone who ended up somewhere he shouldn't be and somehow manages. Karn tells him once that there's someone he never said something important to, and he doesn't know if he'll have time. Roran doesn't ask who that is. Roran's own nights are restless. He dreams of the Eye of the Boar, a great sea whirlpool that supposedly swallows ships and imagination alike. He wakes with the feeling of standing on a ship's prow with Katrina, looking down into something bottomless. And he thinks, how are we supposed to believe we can escape this? During one raid, Roran and the unit come upon a village where Galbatorix's soldiers have just taken hostages, a woman and 2 children. Captain Edric orders a straight charge at the soldiers. Roran looks at the lines of crossbows aimed at the approaching riders and concludes it means death for the whole unit. On his own initiative he takes command, sends some archers to the roof, changes the angle of attack, breaks the formation before the soldiers can fire a volley. Edric is furious. The battle begins. The fight is bloody and long. Soldiers without pain rise through blows that should stop them. Martland loses his hand. A soldier he thought dead rolls on the ground and swings his sword, cutting off the wrist. Martland drives the stump under his arm and doesn't faint. Finishes the man with a dagger in the ear using his hand. Roran sees this from a few paces away and decides he will never again turn his back on any enemy on the ground. Roran kills over 190 soldiers, Karn counts because counting keeps the mind from going wrong. That number is difficult to grasp even for Roran himself. He stands after the skirmish on a pile of bodies, because at some point the pile was the only place giving him a height advantage, and watches crows circling low. He spits. After the fight, Edric orders him to report and start explaining himself. Roran gives his account without softening it. I broke the order because otherwise we'd be dead. Edric can't deny it. He doesn't apologize to Roran either, because discipline is discipline. When the report reaches Naswada, Roran is summoned. Naswada tells him Martland will be promoted to advisor, and Roran will receive a new commander. She also tells him he must be punished for insubordination, 50 lashes publicly, because otherwise every warrior with ambitions will start deciding for themselves when an order is worth following. Roran accepts the verdict without objection. Naswada looks at him with the face of someone who would prefer this didn't have to happen. Back in Trondheim, Eragon walks through coronation councils and learns how long dwarf politics takes when you want something specific. He meets Skeg, an old sculptor who for decades has been reassembling the shattered Isidar Mithram, the Star Rose, the enormous sapphire of Trondheim, destroyed by Arya during the Battle of Varden. Skeg is proud of his work and does it slowly, because haste is foreign to dwarves. He tells Eragon the story of Durak, the master who carved the original in 57 years. Eragon listens and thinks of Saphira, whom he promised to fuse the jewel. During one walk through Trondheim's tunnels, the dwarf Kvister, one of Eragon's guards, dies in an ambush set by 6 men in black with eerily glowing white blades, weapons Eragon has never seen before, cold as ice and lethal as poison. The fight in the tunnel lasts perhaps a minute and is chaotic in a way that's hard to describe afterward. Tight passage, no room for spells, falchion and instinct. Eragon cuts, jumps back, cuts again. One of the guards leaps to help and dies before Eragon can pull him back. A white blade pierces his throat. Eragon pins the last attacker and looks around the corridor. When it was over, his back is scorched. One of the dwarf lanterns exploded during the fight, releasing stored heat. Eragon heals his own burns in the dark corridor, standing over bodies and repeating the formula Brum taught him, because Brum taught him healing spells in free moments like someone who expected his student to need them at the worst possible times. He was right. Then he goes with Oric down below the city, to the widow of Kvister. Glumra lives in a cave deep beneath Trondheim, above a black bottomless lake. She is a small, old dwarf woman, and when she hears of her son's death she plays for a moment on an instrument of rare stone. The melody is such that Eragon can't describe it, as if someone played simultaneously on a harp and a bell and the air. Dwarves express in this way the grief that can't be spoken. Eragon sits and listens with the feeling of entering something he was not invited into, and at the same time that there is no other right place to be. Then Glumra puts on a kettle and serves tea, and talks to him about the gods with the simplicity of someone who has never doubted them, not because she doesn't think, but because for her doubt is as unnecessary as asking whether stone is hard. Eragon tells her he doesn't know himself. She looks at him with something that could be pity if it weren't so calm. She says it will come. Eragon leaves her with the tea still warm in his stomach and the thought that he has rarely spoken so honestly with anyone. Oric identifies the man who ordered the assassination, Vermund, chieftain of Az Sweldenrak Anhuin, who hired the killers through intermediaries. The evidence is circumstantial but sufficient. Oric gathers information through the nights, and the next day at the chief's council he plays the political game he has been planning from the start. At the council Ganel, the priest chieftain of Clan Quan, widely respected as an impartial head of the assembly, asks questions about the attack on Eragon. Oric responds publicly, laying out the chain of evidence step by step. A bracelet of horsehair and amethysts found on the attackers, purchased by a seven-fingered woman working for Vargrimsts, outlaws living outside the clans, who in turn received orders from Vermund. Each link in the chain confirmed by testimony under compulsion of truth. Vermund protests loudly and calls it lies. His warriors look out from under purple veils. The tension in the room rises to the point where Eragon is tracking the hand movements of every Az Sweldenrak Anhuin dwarf. Oric laughs, genuinely laughs loudly from the belly, and says, "Excellent, then we will do absolutely nothing." Absolutely nothing. Vermund doesn't understand for a moment. Then he understands. Oric says nothing about war or revenge. He speaks of exile, the oldest dwarf punishment for dishonoring hospitality. Az Sweldenrak Anhuin will leave Trondheim, will leave the dwarf kingdom, and will not return until a vote of the chiefs restores them. One by one the chiefs rise and vote in favor. Even Vermund's allies. Even NATO, who shrugs with the face of someone who knows when to stay away from a burning haystack. Vermund leaves the hall with a face white as marble, watched by the eyes of everyone present. None of the dwarves standing by the exit makes room for him. He has to find it himself. Then the vote for king. One by one the chiefs declare their votes. Oric gets 5 with a 6th in suspension. Ganel hesitates and NATO votes against, and for a moment it looks like Oric will lose. Then Havard, who had been NATO's ally until now, stands and votes for Oric. Oric whispers to himself, "A treacherous villain became a treacherous villain a second time, and this time it works in our favor." Iron remains. She sits with a lazy smile and narrows her eyes at Eragon in a way that is simultaneously a flirtation and a calculation. She says slowly that NATO is right and Oric is right, and that the most important thing is choosing someone who can lead the dwarves to victory, not someone who is right in theory. The hall doesn't breathe. Iron says she votes for Oric. Oric becomes king. Eragon flies out of the coronation hall before the chiefs have time to rise from their chairs, apologizes to Oric in words mixing the ancient language with Dwarvish, and runs through corridors like someone paying off a debt. He runs a mile from the hall to Trondheim's southern gate, through the tunnel under Varden, and bursts into the open space of the enormous hollow mountain. And Saphira is there. She flies to him with a roar, and for several moments they stand together, forehead to muzzle, laughing and hiccuping with relief. Saphira hiccuping produces random puffs of smoke and tilts her head like a stork, which brings Eragon to tears of laughter. The laughter echoes off the stone vaults of Varden. The dwarves watch from a distance with a mixture of respect and mild bewilderment. The coronation of Oric is grand and loud, drums beating a rhythm audible even outside the mountain. A procession of dwarves in ceremonial armor, 6 boys and 6 girls carrying baskets of flowers. Flowers inside a dwarf mountain being a separate horticultural achievement for which someone paid a real price. Oric walks in the Ingedum cloak, a golden beret on his head, with Voltund, the legendary battle hammer of the first Dwarf King, hanging from his belt. Eragon looks at him and for a moment doesn't see the adopted cousin of Hrothgar or the same Oric who laughed over ale in Varden after the first battle. He sees a king. Ganel recites the long coronation formula in Dwarvish and the ancient language alternately. During the coronation spell, Eragon feels a vast consciousness. Something enormous and non-human touching the space of the hall for a moment, fast and deep as a lightning strike. He doesn't know what it is. He closed himself off from it instinctively and stood for a moment with his heart beating too fast, before it withdrew. He tells no one. Then Saphira fuses the Isidar Mithram. She stands before the jewel that dwarf sculptors assembled from 1,000 pieces, and without spells, without formulas, simply by will and from herself, fuses it. Eragon had asked beforehand whether she could. Saphira said she didn't know. The last time she used magic, she didn't think about how, she simply wanted and the magic happened. Perhaps that is how it is with dragons. The silence in the hall during that moment is absolute. Hundreds of dwarves hold their breath. Saphira lays her muzzle on the jewel, and for a long minute nothing happens. Eragon waits. Then the scaffolding cracks and the Isidar Mithrim stands whole again, but different than it was, as if the dragon's essence soaked into the stone and changed it forever. The dwarves watch in a silence Eragon has never heard in Trondheim before. Someone at the front of the crowd begins to cry. Then everyone. At the feast, Oric formally accepts Eragon into Clan Ingedam as heir after Hrothgar, a commitment Hrothgar made before his death, now fulfilled by his successor. Eragon is now a dwarf in everything but blood. He has a clan, family obligations, the right to demand blood revenge if anyone of his kin is wronged, and the right to a seat at any council where the Ingedam vote. He kneels before Oric and speaks the words of the oath in Dwarvish, learned over a week, with an accent that amuses several present, but none of them allow themselves a smile, because the ceremony is serious. Eragon speaks through a water mirror with Naswada and asks permission to leave for Elesmera. Naswada says, soon. Eragon says, meaning when exactly? Naswada is planning the Siege of Feinster, then Bellatona, then the march toward Drasleona, and beyond it you are Ubane, the relentless sequence of cities on the map, each one closer to the heart of Galbatorix. Eragon says, if I don't come back stronger, none of those sieges will matter when Murtagh appears again, and he will appear. Naswada is quiet for a long moment. Then she says, you have a few days. 6, 7, maybe 8. She'll delay the march on Feinster by 2 days, giving him time to reach Elesmera and get back for the siege. It costs her soldiers she'll lose waiting instead of attacking at the right moment. She tells him this plainly, so he knows what he's asking for. Eragon thanks her. She says, don't thank me, fly fast. Roran accepts the verdict, 50 lashes, without a word of complaint or request for mercy. When Naswada tells him during the audience, he asks only one thing, will it be public? Naswada says yes, it has to be public, otherwise the punishment means nothing. Roran nods. He asks whether he'll keep command. Naswada says he'll receive a new captain and serve under him, and what happens after that depends on Roran himself. He stands in the square when the punishment is carried out, because it has to be public and Roran understands why. He had a father in Carvajal who told him a rule is a rule precisely when it's hard to keep. The pain is real and sharp, and Roran counts the blows in his head to have something to occupy himself with. Several hundred Vardens stand around him. None of them laughs or nods with satisfaction. Most look at the ground or to the side, because there is nothing joyful here. Then he goes back to the tent and Katrina sits beside him without a word, and he rests his head on her lap and lies there until the pain in his back becomes bearable. He tells her he would do it again. She says, I know, and adds nothing more because there is nothing to add. During Eragon's absence, Saphira doesn't sit idle. She guards the camp, keeps Murtagh away by her presence alone, or at least that is the plan. When Martland's unit returns, Saphira watches from the sky, most horses without riders, several with wounded tied to saddles. She nods at her observations and stops worrying, because Roran is alive. She feels it through the faint echo of the spell in the ring. She tells Eragon at their next contact. Eragon asks whether he's wounded. Saphira says, Naswada will tell you when she finds out herself. Eragon flies out of Varden at night, while the coronation still continues in dances and ale. Saphira carries him on her back and together they rise above the clouds, above the lines of camp lights, above everything known, toward the north, where Elesmera waits and Oromis with his golden dragon Glaedr, and where there may still be a chance for Eragon to learn enough before the time runs out. They don't know how much time they have. Naswada said 7 days, maybe 8. They fly fast. Roran is fighting under the Varden's banner. Eragon is flying toward answers he doesn't know he needs yet. And Galbatorix, who has barely appeared in this entire novel, is about to reveal exactly how untouchable he truly is. Roran's stronghammer is flogged 50 times in front of the assembled Varden, and he does not make a sound. He bit down on a leather peg. He kept his eyes open. He counted. That's who Roran is, the kind of man who counts while he suffers, because counting means he is still in control of something. So 50 lashes. Public. Witnessed. The math is brutal and it is correct. What's interesting is that Roran agrees with it. He doesn't think the punishment is unjust. He thinks the system that produces the punishment is unjust, because the system was designed for soldiers who weren't him, making decisions that weren't his. But he accepts the cost anyway because that is what his personal code demands. He is healed, on Naswada's order, by Triana and Angela both, which is not standard practice. Angela's presence here is worth noting. She is the same healer who treated Eragon. 2 cousins. Same healer. Different scars, different prices. Then Naswada comes to his tent. She promotes him to command of a joint human Urgal unit. She tells him, flatly, that his cousin Eragon is her insurance policy for his compliance. What she is actually doing is manufacturing a symbol. Roran's flogging was never purely about justice, it was about credibility. A commander who was publicly punished and publicly survived becomes someone that every warrior in that camp can believe in. Naswada is not administering discipline. She is investing in a myth. Katrina, Roran's wife, pregnant, furious, waiting in the tent, has her own view of this arrangement, and it has nothing to do with military symbology. The first test of Roran's joint command is an ambush of an imperial supply column. He executes it cleanly. 0 losses. Clean victory. He is, by any measure, genuinely good at this. But the victory isn't the test. What happens after the battle is. While counting the dead, Roran finds for Urgles torturing a prisoner. Slowly, deliberately, as a kind of entertainment. He kills the prisoner to end the suffering, quickly and without ceremony. Then he confronts Yarbog, the Urgle champion of the unit, whose response to all of this is to issue a challenge. Bare hands, no weapons, leadership duel, to submission or death. This is Urgle custom. Yarbog is not being unreasonable by Urgle standards. Roran has just violated those standards, and in Urgle culture, that requires a response. Roran accepts. He wins. And then, with Yarbog pinned and the fight decided, he refuses to kill him. This is the moment. Not the victory, but the refusal. Roran demands public surrender instead of blood, and Yarbog gives it, citing Eragon Shadeslayer's name as the reason the defeat carries no dishonor. A human beating an Urgle champion is humiliating. But a human who trained under the Shadeslayer? That is a different category of opponent. The alliance holds. What Roran has done, without necessarily realizing it, is demonstrate a principle that runs through this entire trilogy. Violence is a tool, not a reward. The moment it becomes pleasure, as it did for those 4 Urgles with their prisoner, it loses its purpose. Roran is not Urgle. He does not need to follow Urgle rules. And because he doesn't, he wins in a way that Urgle rules could not have produced. His mage, Karn, watches all of this quietly. Their partnership, the warrior and the spellcaster, is established here. It will matter at Feinster. Now cut to the sky. Eragon and Saphira are flying into a headwind. The journey from Varden to Alesmera takes several days, and for most of them, the wind is fighting every wing beat. Saphira refuses to use the energy stored in Eragon's ring, a reserve called Arin, insisting on saving it. She is thinking ahead. She is usually thinking ahead. What's quieter and stranger is what Eragon does one night when the exhaustion becomes too much. He prays, not to any god of the Varden or the elves. He prays to Guntera, the chief deity of the dwarves, invoking a form he barely knows. And the wind dies that same night. Paulini doesn't explain this. He doesn't need to. The point isn't whether Guntera is real. The point is that Eragon, in a moment of genuine desperation, reached for something outside himself. That's new. He has been so focused on mastering what he can control, language, magic, swordsmanship, that the possibility of something uncontrollable acting in his favor had barely occurred to him. When they finally reach the edge of the ancient forest due Varden, they contact Oromis through a scrying pool. His answer is immediate. No remote lessons. Come in person. There are things that cannot be taught at a distance. They fly on. Here is what Eragon knows going into his meeting with Oromis. His mother was Selena, known as the Black Hand, one of Morzen's most feared agents. His father was presumably Morzen, the first and most powerful of the Forsworn, the riders who betrayed their order for Galbatorix. That is the identity Eragon has been carrying. The son of a traitor, the inheritor of a bloodline soaked in treachery. Here is what Eragon learns at the clifftop table above Alesmera. His father was Brom. Oromis tells him the full story. Brom, already working against the Forsworn, infiltrated Morzen's estate under a false identity, a gardener. He fell genuinely in love with Selena. Eragon was conceived. It was Brom who slew Morzen in Gilead, fled, and eventually made his way to Carvajal, where he spent years watching over a boy he didn't know was his son, bound by oaths of secrecy he could not break. Saphira has known since before Tyrm. Oromis has known since Brom confided in him decades ago. Both were oath-bound. Both watched Eragon suffer under the weight of the wrong name. What Eragon receives at the end of this conversation is something he did not expect. A message. Brom left his final words preserved inside Saphira's memory. A farewell he couldn't deliver in person, because in person, he couldn't say who he was. In that message, Brom calls Eragon his son. He offers tactical wisdom. Do not try to overpower Galbatorix. Find the gaps in his thinking. Win through cunning, not force. This is the moment the entire first book recontextualizes. Every gruff lesson. Every story Brom told about the riders. Every time he stepped between Eragon and danger. Every death he risked and eventually accepted, on that road from Carvajal to Gilead. He knew. He was always choosing between his oath and his son, over and over on every mile of that journey. Eragon's first response is rage, at the deception, at the years of not knowing. Then grief. Then something quieter and harder to name. He is not the son of a traitor. He is the son of a man who spent his entire adult life trying to undo the worst thing his world had ever done. The foundation beneath his feet has not disappeared. It has just been replaced with something more solid, and more painful. Oromis gives him one more thing before this conversation ends. A Fairth, an elven magical portrait, of his mother Selena. He will never have met her. Now he can see her face. And one thing is confirmed on the margins of all this, almost casually. Murtagh is Eragon's half-brother. Same mother, different fathers. Morzin fathered Murtagh, Brum fathered Eragon. They are bound by blood and divided by everything else. The Brum revelation is the emotional center of Brisingr. But the information Glaedr delivers next is the structural center of the entire series. Glaedr tells Eragon and Saphira about the Eldinari, the heart of hearts. Inside every dragon's chest lies a jewel-like object, roughly the size of a fist, that can hold the dragon's entire consciousness after death. It is not an external artifact. It is part of their anatomy. A dragon who chooses, or is forced, to release their Eldinari before dying can continue to exist as a conscious mind inside that stone. Indefinitely, aware but unable to act in the physical world. Galbatorix did not win the war against the riders through superior skill or a more powerful dragon. He won it by collecting the Eldinari of the dragons he killed, some already separated before death, others extracted by force, others taken from tortured minds that eventually broke and surrendered. He built a library of enslaved dragon souls. He draws on their pooled magical energy whenever he needs it, which means he has never, not once, in all the decades since the fall of the riders, fought at his own power level. Every rider who has faced him has been killed by something they couldn't see. The Varden have been fighting a man backed by hundreds of imprisoned dragon consciousnesses. Every spell he has ever cast, every barrier Eragon has ever failed to breach, every time Murtagh walked away from a fight Eragon thought he should have won. All of it is explained in one word. Eldinari. Saphira learns that her species is not nearly extinct. It is enslaved. That distinction is almost worse than the alternative, because extinction means absence, and absence can eventually become history. Slavery means the dead are still there, still aware, still in the dark. Eragon is already calculating. If the Eldinari were freed or destroyed, Galbatorix would revert to the power of an ordinary rider. He would still be formidable. He would not be a god. Oromis also mentions, briefly and with frustration, that he searched his scrolls for any reference to the Rock of Cuthian and the Vault of Souls, names that emerged from an earlier prophecy, and found nothing conclusive. They sound familiar to him. He cannot place them. He flags it as significant and sets it aside. It will not be set aside for long. This book is called Brisingr. There is a sword. It has to be made. Eragon approaches the Minoa tree, an ancient tree in the heart of Elesmera that contains, within its bark and roots, the consciousness of an elf named Linnea, who merged with it centuries ago and never came back. The tree holds bright steel beneath its roots, a rare meteorite-derived metal from which all rider swords are forged. Saphira asks nicely. The tree does not respond. Then Saphira sets it on fire. The tree retaliates. Roots erupt from the ground, seize Eragon and Saphira, and nearly kill them both. Eragon identifies himself, the last free rider, come in need. He and Saphira offer energy as reparation. After a long, tense negotiation conducted mostly in silence and the ancient language, the tree relinquishes a buried lump of bright steel. Then it takes something from Eragon. Nobody names the price. Not the tree. Not Eragon. Not the narrative. Whatever was taken, Eragon either doesn't notice yet, or doesn't understand what he's lost. That thread will stay open. With the metal secured, Eragon brings it to Roran, the elven smith who forged every rider sword that ever existed, and who swore an oath never to forge again after the last war. She cannot break that oath. She finds a different solution. She links her mind to Eragon's and controls his hands, working through him, guiding every strike of the hammer and every fold of the metal while technically never touching it herself. The loophole is ethically questionable and philosophically brilliant. Roran cares about neither of those things. She cares about the craft. They work through the night. Fire, hammering, songs in the ancient language woven into the cooling steel. When it is done, Eragon holds a blade. He needs a name. He says the word that has been living in his chest all night. Brisingr. The sword ignites. Blue flame runs the length of the blade. Not summoned, not commanded, just triggered by the name every time. Roran confirms this is not something she planned. It is the sword expressing itself. She has made many swords. This is the finest. Eragon now has a weapon that turns into a statement every time he says its name. Angela's response on hearing it later. Fire? How boring. Angela is, as always, immune to wonder. Oromis tells Eragon and Saphira that he and Glaedr intend to join Islanzati's forces at Gilead. They are ending their century of hiding. Eragon argues against it. Oromis has a neurological condition. Unpredictable episodes that seize his body without warning, stripping him of control at random moments in combat. Eragon has seen it happen. He knows what it means in a duel. Oromis acknowledges all of this and goes anyway, because a rider who does not fight when fighting is possible is not a rider anymore. Before they part, Glaedr does something extraordinary. He reaches inside his own chest and physically separates his Eldonari from his body, and gives it to Eragon. This is not a metaphor. The heart of hearts, the stone that holds everything Glaedr is, leaves his body and passes into Eragon's keeping. Glaedr explains his reasoning precisely. If they die, his knowledge and power remain accessible. If they survive, the Eldonari can function as a long-range communication link. In either outcome, the people he believes in are better positioned. This is logic. It is also love. The two things are not in conflict here. Eragon accepts, though he doesn't fully understand what he's holding. He will understand later, in a way he would give anything to have been spared. Oromis, before departing, says something that has never been said to Eragon before. If Oromis dies, Eragon will be responsible for training the next rider and dragon. The future of the Order rests on him. Not on the elves, not on the Varden, not on any institution that still exists. On Eragon. He says it plainly. Then they leave. 3 days of flying. Then Feinster. The coastal city is under siege, and the Varden is stalling at the walls. Eragon and Saphira arrive the way they always do, announced by a plume of dragonfire. They find Arya and Blodgarm surrounded on the wall top and cut them free, then fight their way through to the main gate. The garrison captain refuses to yield. Eragon kills him. This is the decision of a man who has made peace mostly with what war requires, but inside the city, when a boy no older than Eragon was in Carvajal lunges at him with a dagger, he stops himself. He doesn't kill the boy. He stands there, shaking slightly, and lets the moment pass. This is the scene that separates Eragon the warrior from Eragon the weapon. He has spent 3 books training himself to be more lethal. The choice not to use that lethality made in a fraction of a second in the middle of a battle is its own kind of skill. The gate opens. The Varden floods in. Eragon, cutting through the portcullis chain, shouts the name of his sword, and Brisingr ignites in front of the entire army. If anyone in the Varden wasn't sure what they were fighting beside, they know now. He finds Roran in the press of the advance. They have about 40 words to spare. Eragon uses them to tell Roran who his father was. He cannot wait. He has been carrying this since Alesmara and his cousin is right there and it has to come out now. Roran hears it, absorbs it in the way Roran absorbs everything. Present, serious, already moving forward. They have a city to take. Inside the citadel, 3 of Galbatorix's magicians are in the process of destroying themselves, sacrificing their own sanity and bodies to summon a shade. This is a last act of pure spite. The city is lost. Let it cost them something. Lady Lorana of Feinster begs Eragon and Arya to stop it. They try. They are not fast enough. Varog manifests, and then, simultaneously, something else happens. The Eldonari in Eragon's pack pulls him sideways. Not physically, in perception. He is suddenly also in Gilead, above the burning city, watching through Glaedr's senses. Oromis and Glaedr are fighting Murtagh and Thorn. The battle is even until it isn't. Galbatorix speaks through Murtagh's voice. He does not shout. He offers. He reminds Oromis that there are other choices. That this does not have to end here. That the war could simply stop if Oromis would stop it. Oromis refuses. Because Oromis has always been exactly who he is, even alone, even without an audience, even at the end. Then the episode strikes him. His own nervous system turns against him mid-duel in the air. Naegling falls from his grip. Murtagh drives Zarok through him, and the first rider to fight Galbatorix openly in more than a century. The last teacher of the riders, the man who survived an age of darkness through sheer patient purpose, dies. Glaedr screams. He drives Thorn back, but Oromis is already gone. Glaedr retreats into his own Eldonari, becomes stone, becomes darkness, becomes present but unreachable. He is now alive inside the pack on Eragon's back, and he is howling, and Eragon can hear it. All of this happens while Eragon is standing in a citadel in Feinster, where a shade has Arya by the throat. Varog is not one mind. He is many hostile spirits in a single body, distributed across multiple consciousnesses, which means conventional mental combat doesn't work. You cannot overwhelm a target that is already overwhelmed. Eragon finds a way to grip that distributed awareness and hold it long enough for Arya to drive her blade through the shade's heart. Varog comes apart in light and silence. Both Eragon and Arya are now Shadeslayers. In the history of Alagaësia, that title has been held by 3 people before this night. In an abandoned kitchen in the Citadel of Feinster, the only quiet room left in a city that is still technically on fire, Eragon tells Niswada everything. His parentage, the Eldunari, Galbatorix's actual power source, Oromis, Glaedr, how he watched it happen. He lays it all out, one thing after another, in the flat measured voice of someone who has stopped processing and started reporting. Niswada takes it in. Then she asks him, not for strategy, not for analysis, to tell her about Oromis and Glaedr as people. Who they were, what they cared about. She is going to mourn them properly, and she needs information to do it. Eragon talks. Both women weep. Arya says what no one else has said out loud yet. The Eldunari mean hundreds of dragon consciousnesses are alive right now, aware, enslaved inside Galbatorix's citadel at Ubane. They cannot tell anyone, the secret is too dangerous, and the elves are too exposed. They have to carry this knowledge in silence, which means carrying it alone. This is how Brisingr ends. Not with a victory march. Not with a declaration of war. With 3 people in a kitchen, exhausted, holding the weight of everything they now understand, trying to decide what comes next. The Varden has taken Feinster. Eragon has his sword. He has his name. He knows his enemy's actual secret. And Oromis is dead. Glaedr is dark and grieving in a stone the size of a fist, inside a bag, on the back of the last free rider in the world. The war is entering its final phase. What remains to be written is not the question of whether Galbatorix can be beaten. It's the question of what it will cost to beat him, and whether anything recognizable will survive the cost. Somewhere in the ancient records there is a reference to a place called the Rock of Cuthian and the Vault of Souls. Oromis searched for it and couldn't place it. It sounds like something that matters. It sounds like something that will have to wait. The darkness outside the kitchen window is the same darkness it has always been. But now they know what's living inside it.